Hi folks, I've decided that I want to learn how to play the violin. My goal is definitely not to become some kind of virtuoso, but I think I could use the violin in my music production. Anyway, next 7 days I'm going to try to learn as much as possible and as a final exam compose my own violin song. At this point I have zero experience and I'm literally holding the violin for the first time in my life. But the violin is a string instrument and even though I have never played it, I've been playing the guitar for about 15 years now. So I hope some of my guitar skills will be handy. About this violin, I have no idea how good or bad it is. I just looked online for something with positive reviews and reasonable price and gave it a shot. Okay, let's not drag out this introduction and go straight to the first day. Welcome back. Every time I start learning something new, I spend some time on the internet studying about the topic. So most of the day I was watching beginner's violin tutorials to understand the basics. But then I tried to set and tune my violin, which was way more challenging than I expected. Let me explain. Here are the main parts of the violin: the wooden body, tuning pegs, fingerboard, bridge, tailpiece, fine tuners, and of course strings. In standard tuning, strings are tuned to the notes G, D, A, and E. Like any other string instrument, when you want to tune it, you have to stretch the strings until they are vibrating on a specific frequency. In the case of the violin, you need to stretch the strings using the tuning pegs. But here I was facing my first problem. When I wanted to stretch the strings, the tuning pegs didn't have any resistance and they always rolled back. It turned out that you have to push tuning pegs more inwards. The best technique seemed to be pushing the pegs while twisting them and at the same time pushing with the thumb from the other side as a counterforce. Another important thing is the correct bridge placement, which is this light wooden piece. And when you loosen your strings, you can easily move it. All the tutorial which I watched showed the following rule of thumb. When you look at the violin, you can see two F-shaped holes. And when you look closely, every hole has a small cut pointing outside. Imagine a line connecting these 2 points. Straight on this line and straight in the middle is the place where you want to have your bridge. It's also necessary to have your bridge perpendicular to the surface, and because the bridge is not symmetrical, it has to be in the right direction, where the thinnest string is on the lowest side of the bridge. At this point I was finally able to tune my violin. At first I tuned every string the best I could with the tuning pegs, and then I used these little fine tuners to precisely get the necessary note. So my violin should be ready to play. But today has been a long day and I would rather leave my first attempt for tomorrow. Today I was trying to play my first notes. Well, and the word trying is really in place because here's my first attempt. If you didn't hear anything, well, me neither. Later I found out that I didn't use a very important tool called a rosin. It's this little block that looks like some hardened jello. You have to apply it on the bow if you want to get any sound from the strings. The first time was necessary to scratch a surface a little bit, otherwise it wouldn't catch on the bow. I used a soft sandpaper until my rosin looked something like this. When I applied it on a bow, I used a medium-paced movement because I read that a fast movement creates heat and then the rosin may not be applied properly. Sources I found say that for a brand new bow it's good to go back and forth about 30 to 50 times and then as a maintenance 7 to 10 times every 4 to 6 hours of playing. Also, while doing it, I recommend having a thumb on this metal piece down here so the rosin will not crack after the hard impact. Which of course immediately happened to me on my first try. After this, my violin finally started to make some noise. It's something? This little success really made me happy, but not for very long. Even with this short attempt, I realized how difficult it will be to play in tune, and I have to find some good practice strategy. I will explain everything tomorrow. So, here is the deal. When you want to play a different notes on a string, you have to shorten the string's length. The shorter the length, the higher the pitch. But it has to be shortened at very specific places if you want the clear notes. For example, on the guitar, these places are given by the frets, which is very convenient. You just need to press a string somewhere between the frets, and when the string leans on the closest fret, voila, you have your note. But the violin has no frets, and you can't just press your finger somewhere, you have to press exactly. The first thing first, I had to know where are my notes on the fingerboard. The best advice I found is to mark these notes with a narrow piece of tape. Here is the layout of the violin, and I mark the following notes with the tape. It's something called the first position, where you use each next finger to play these notes. According to internet wisdom, here are the specific measurements for where to put the tapes. I mark these values with a pencil, double check the notes with a tuner, and then place the tapes. The violin was ready, but when I thought I could finally start to play, then another thing came up, which took me an unexpectedly huge amount of time to practice. How to hold the bow. I'm still not 100% sure that I'm holding it correctly, but anyway. The thumb should be bent and placed in this gap between this leather and plastic piece. The index, middle and ring fingers go over the top, and the most important thing is to have your pinky finger also bent and vertically on top of the bow as a counterweight. At first it felt really unnatural, but here is something that helped me understand why it's held this way. As a player, you should be more like a guide for the bow and not holding it firmly like a warrior holds a sword. Everything is about relaxed muscles in your hand while you are playing. Okay, this preparation, exploration phase was quite exhausting, but I should be finally ready for some serious playing. But I think I'll get some rest before that disaster. Today I fully realized why the violin is so difficult to play. There are a lot of movements which are really hard to master. For every string you need a specific angle of your bow. You also have to pay attention to straight move of your bow. And while you move in it, you have to continuously apply a different pressure if you want a consistent sound. For all of this you have to build a solid muscle memory, and that's not easy at all. I decided to focus on the essentials and try to making it right and musical. At the beginning, I eliminated the left hand from the equation and trained just my bowing hand. I played only the open strings and really paid attention to having all the bow angles and movements the best I could, so everything sounded good to my ears. When I was feeling a little bit confident with the bow, I added a left hand into the business. At this point I was training also with a tuner to be sure I played the notes correctly. I started with one string only, and for every position I tried to visually memorize where exactly my fingers were placed. Then I repeated the process for every other string. My first attempts naturally sounded like someone was slaughtering a pig. But at the end of the day I tried to learn one of our Slovak child song. It's really simple, using just few notes on one string, and here is my best try. It was definitely not perfect, but that's part of the learning. My journey will continue tomorrow. I want to raise a difficulty bar a little bit, and I found an awesome song for it. Welcome to day number 5. The song I mentioned is Ode to Joy by Ludwig van Beethoven. I chose it because it didn't seem to be very difficult, but it forced me to play on more than one string, which is perfect for training. At first I was playing it without the bow, just plucking the strings with my index finger. This way I could fully focus on my left hand and memorize the finger pattern. Then I added a bow. Anyway, not much to talk about today. This is my version of Ode to Joy after a day of practice. There is a lot to improve. Unfortunately, I don't have much time left. My challenge is to compose my own song, and tomorrow I have to start working on it, no matter how bad it will be. Welcome to the grand finale! Over the past 2 days I've been trying to create something melodic with the violin and learn to play it as well as I could. First I made a guitar backing track with something that sounded good to me, and then I made a simple violin melody. Finding a melody with a regular violin playing was kind of a struggle for me, but then my guitar instinct kicked in and I tried to play the violin like I play a guitar. Thankfully with this approach I had something like in 5 minutes. However, playing it with the violin bow is a completely different story, and it took me a lot of time and cursing. Okay, I'm not going to delay it any longer. Here is the result of my 7-day challenge of learning the violin. And that's it. It was far from perfect, but I tried my best. At this point I truly admire any professional violin player. It's hard as hell. Anyway, if you are trying to learn the violin, I hope this video will help you overcome some beginner's obstacles. If you are watching it just for fun, I hope you found it interesting. However, thanks to all of you for your time, and I'll see you in the next video.